Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw an X and a Y axis. And let's do my little graph in red. So let's make it just go like this. Now, I don't care what these numbers are. I'm not putting particular numbers in there. What I want to do is I want to set up my formula. Okay, I'll need a formula to find the midpoint if a line is being slanted like this. All right, if it's going diagonal, I need to find what that is. So let's call this point something. What general point can I call this? What did we do yesterday? We called that point something. Yeah, it could represent anything. So x1 and y1. That's my 1 point. You got it? My number 2 point is up here. Good. I'm going to call that x2, y2. So I've got my 2 points. What I want to do is find what? I'm not looking for the distance. We did that yesterday. What are we finding today? The midpoint. That's good. Where do you think? I'll tell you what. I'm going to move this around here. Tell me where you think the midpoint is. Tell me when. About right there? Maybe a little higher.
Right there.
Around in here? Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. Probably around in there somewhere. That would be the midpoint, wouldn't it? I want to find out where that midpoint is located. If this is x1, y1, this is x2, y2, what is the ordered pair of that midpoint? Well, watch this. Let's do a different color here. Let's make this blue. Watch this. What if I went horizontally? Remember what we just finished doing? We can find the midpoint horizontally and we can find the midpoint vertically, correct? So let's make a horizontal and let's make, oops, didn't judge that very well, did I? That's pretty good. And sorry, I'm being just a little picky here, but it's okay. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Now look at this blue one right here. How do I find the midpoint of the blue one? I'd say the midpoint would be around in here somewhere, wouldn't it? Now if this is x1, this would be what? x2. How do I find the midpoint of this? Right? If this is x2 right here and this is x1 right here, how do I find where the midpoint's located? That's right, add them together and divide by 2. So x1 plus what? x2 divided by 2. That's where that midpoint would be right here, wouldn't it? You with me? What about the midpoint along the y? I'd say the midpoint would be about in here somewhere. That's just an eyeball guess. So look, this would be my what? y2, and this would be my y1, wouldn't it? So where would the midpoint be located? Yeah. Whoops. I put an extra thing in there. It would just be y1 plus y2 over 2. You see that? Now look, I went over halfway on the x, and I went, I'll just do this as a dotted line. I went halfway on my y, right? It's the same distance over as it is to here. So guess what my point is right here? It's x1 plus x2 over 2, right? That's how far over you went. And then how far up did you go? You went y1 plus y2 over 2. If you understand how we got to this, that's nice. You don't absolutely have to be able to do these problems, but I think it's nice, and I think it's really nice to be able to show you where that came from. All right, and I basically showed you from scratch how you got the midpoint formula, and that right there is the midpoint formula. Let's write it out. Let's put it down here. We'll kind of make it a little bit bigger. The midpoint is equal to. Now watch what I'm going to write this as. This is not just a number, is it? What is it? It's an, give me a math word, 2 words. Ordered pair. This is an ordered pair. So watch. The midpoint, it's x1 plus x2 over 2. That's the first part of the point. The second part of the point is y1 plus y2 over 2. Notice, your answer is a midpoint. It's a point. It's an ordered pair. It's got an x, it's got a y. I could almost promise you, I hope this doesn't happen, I really do. I hope you prove me wrong. But I can almost promise you, just because of past, what I've seen in the past experience, that somebody is going to say, find the midpoint between this point and this point. And somebody's going to say, oh, square root of 23. They're going to write that for a midpoint. Is there any way in the world that that's going to be a midpoint? No. What is this? This is a length, isn't it? So this would be an answer to what kind of a problem? The length, or the, what word do we use? The distance. This would be the answer to a distance kind of a problem, right? So don't write this kind of an answer for a midpoint. A midpoint should always look like a point. It's a mid what? Point. So a point is an ordered what? Pair. All right, so your answer should always look like an ordered pair. Even after I say this, even after I harp on it and tell you to make sure that you write it as an ordered pair, I could almost promise you, and I hope this isn't true, but I can almost promise you somebody's going to write an answer down like this, and they're going to get confused between distance and midpoint. A midpoint is a specific place. Okay, where is the midpoint? Where is halfway between here and here? It's right here. Does it make any sense of saying square root of 23? No, that's the distance. That's how long the line is. You got it? I keep picking on square root of 23, but you get the idea. All right? I think I've said that enough. Let's do an example. Okay, here's a problem straight in the book. It's on the top of page 28 if you want to follow along. It says find the coordinates at M, the midpoint of line ST. So it's line ST, but we want to find M because M is the midpoint. You with me? Look what they give you. They give you S, which is negative 6, 3, and they give you T. So they give you both endpoints, which is 1, 0. You don't have to graph this thing. That's what's nice about using the formula. Same thing with the distance. You don't have to graph them. Just use the formula. So let's find out what the midpoint is. So the midpoint is equal to, I'm going to write it out again, especially since we're first learning it, I would write it out every single time. It's x1 plus x2 over 2, and then you add up the y's. It's supposed to be plus, kind of doesn't look like it. Plus y2 over 2. All right? There's our midpoint formula. So if I want to find the midpoint, what do? I take the two x's and add them up. Let's do that. It's negative 6 plus what? 1. And divide that by 2. We'll do that in a second. Now let's take the y's and add those up. What are my y values? 3 plus 0. And take that and divide it by 2. And now let's just simplify it. What's negative 6 plus 1? It's negative 5. You guys did know that, right? Okay, you're just not being talkative? All right, so negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5 over 2. What's this? 3 plus 0, everybody. Yeah, everybody. I guess Elizabeth is everybody. 3 over 2. You can just leave it like that. All right, you can leave it just like that. Or if you wanted to, you could write it to a mixed number. I don't see why you would want to, but you could if you wanted to. What would this be as a mixed number? Negative 2.5. And then this would be what? 1.5. All right, you could leave it either way. I'd be fine with that, or I'd be fine with this. Tell you the truth, if it was me personally, I would not change it from this to this, because you could just make a mistake, right? That's the only thing that could happen. You could just make a mistake. Why not keep it like that and you're good to go? It's pretty easy, isn't it, to do midpoint? Yeah, really easy. Take the endpoints, add them up, divide by 2. Now we're going to look at something that's a little bit more complicated. Just a little bit, not a whole lot, just a little bit. All right, let's pause this and we'll write the problem down. 15 minutes. All right, let's take a look. This is example 5. It's on page 28 if you want to follow along. It says find point J if K is the midpoint of line segment JL and they give you point L. So this time they don't give you two endpoints. What are they giving you? But look. This is pretty straightforward. They give you what? A midpoint. Okay. And what's this thing right here? This is an endpoint. That's right. So this time they give you a midpoint and an endpoint, kind of like this. Now, I know it's slanted. I'm just going to draw it straight across. This is just a rough little sketch. Look, it says line segment JL. So here's line segment JL, and it says that K is the what? Is the midpoint. Okay? So look, they tell you K, they tell you L. What are you looking for? You're looking for J, which is the endpoint. It's a little bit different. Okay, but we're still going to use the same formulas because we're still talking about midpoint. Everybody with me now? Everybody paying attention, right? All right, let's take a look. Let's write out the formula for midpoint. Midpoint is, you should have this memorized by the end of class, don't you think? We've written it down enough. If not, by the end of your homework assignment, you should have it memorized. And it needs to be memorized for a quiz or a test. So let's see what we can do here. We know the midpoint, though, don't we? So instead of solving for the midpoint like we did last time, guess what I can do? Are you watching? we can take this midpoint and put it in for this right here. So what is the midpoint? Somebody talk to me. Jesse, what is the midpoint? They tell you. Give it to me. Go ahead. Quick, quick, quick. What's the midpoint? Give me the point. Yes, you do. I will not accept that as an answer because, look, I have the word midpoint. I have an arrow pointing to it. So you cannot tell me you don't know. It's -1, 2. Thank you. All right? So I will not accept you saying I don't know for something like that, okay? Sorry to get a little bit mean, but you got to think a little bit. Look, it says right there the midpoint is this. Now look at this. x1 plus x2. One of these x's, these are the two x's for the endpoints, right? Well, they give you one endpoint and they ask for another endpoint. So the endpoint that they don't give you right here, we'll just call x1. What's the endpoint that they give you? That's one of the endpoints right there. So what's the x part of that endpoint? Give me the number. What's the x part of this endpoint? This is the endpoint. What's the x part of that? It's a 3. Right, it's a 3. It's not a 2. This is the x part of that endpoint. So look, I've got x1 plus 3 divided by what? What's my formula tell me to do? Divided by 2. Let's do the y's this time. So the one that I don't know, I'll call y1. Which one do I know? I know -5. So I put plus -5. My formula says to do what? Divide by 2. So this is how we set it up. You see what I just did? This is the midpoint. So I put the point in for that spot right there, -1, 2. This is the part that I don't know. This is the part that I do know. Right? I'm trying to find J, aren't I? So really, I'm trying to find x1, y1. So I don't know this, but I do know this. There's the x1 plus the 3 divided by 2. Here's the y1 plus -5 divided by 2. Do you see how I just followed that formula? That's all I did. Now, this is the part that's a little bit tricky. Let's do this in a different color. Where did I get this 3? Because that's the x part of this. All right, because this is one of the endpoints. Remember, these two x's represent the endpoints. I don't know one of the endpoints, so I call it x. I do know one of the endpoints. I'll call it x2, which in this case is the 3. Where did I get the y2 from? I got it because that's the y part of that endpoint. Now what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to take that. What do you think this is equal to? Look, this is a midpoint, this is a midpoint. It's the same exact midpoint because there's an equal sign between them. So what is this thing that I just circled? What is that equal to? Come on, look at it. This is a midpoint. This is a midpoint. They're equal to each other, right? Do you see it? They're equal to each other. So this must be, say it, Brett. It's -1, right? Do you see it? This is the first part of this midpoint. This is the first part of this midpoint. If they're equal to each other, Isaiah, tap him, please. Bro. All right, if this right here and this right here are in the same spot and there's an equal sign in between them, we're going to set them equal. So watch. Now, instead of calling it x1, I'm just going to call it x. We don't care about the 1. So x plus 3 over 2 is equal to what? -1. Let's do the y. What's that going to be? Y plus -5, or what? Y, let's write it as -5 over 2. What's that going to equal? That's going to equal, no, it's going to equal the 2. Look, this equals the -1, this equals the 2, right? Because they're in the same spot. Do you see that? Look, I got a midpoint here and a midpoint here. The x's must be the same, the y's must be the same if they're the same midpoint. Make sense? So that's going to equal what? A 2. Now we can do some algebra and solve for it. Now watch, this is actually the easy part. How do I get rid of that 2? Multiply both sides by 2. Alright, so that cancels, that cancels. I've got x plus 3 equals what? -2. One more step and we're almost done. Subtract a 3, subtract a 3, x equals, what's -2 minus 3? -5. So that's the x part of the point I'm trying to find. Let's do the same thing here. Thanks. Multiply that by 2. Multiply that by 2. Cancels. Y minus 5 equals what? 4. Add a 5 to both sides. Y is 9. This is how we write our answer. We write it as a point. The x part of that point is -5. The y part of that point is 9. And that is that point right there. Okay? If I went too fast, go this weekend on YouTube, check it out. I bet you'll understand it after that.